football is very seldom to pick the best 11 individual players and put them on the pitch.
It's Rog, still reeling after watching the United States women dumped out of World Cup competition on penalties against Sweden by the cruelest of micrometers. A brutal ending after 7 rounds of penalty kicks, but one which honestly capped off a true damp squib of a tournament campaign. The earliest elimination of a defending World Cup champion ever. The first time the United States have failed to make at least a semi-final in this competition. Unprecedented days of challenge. And when I thought about how I could get some objective, sobering tactical analysis, a real sense of what happened, not an emotional one, I thought of chatting to one person and one person only. I'm delighted he's made the mistake of accepting my invitation to return, partially because he's Swedish, but partially because his understanding of football has really powered my understanding of the tournament so far. And because this is really an hour of national need, it's incredible to welcome back to the pod from Arsenal women, by way of Buru, Sweden, to Mr. Jonas Eidevall.
Thank you, Rog. Delighted to be back.
I bet you are. First of all, congratulations to you, Jonas, to your nation, to your women's team, to the 3 Arsenal players on that Swedish squad. Stina Blackstenius, Amanda Eilstedt, and Lena Hurtig, whose final penalty was the American Slayer. Was it you that taught her how to backspin that penalty in training?
No, absolutely nothing to do with that. But it was the tiniest of margins in a game. It's of course, Sweden as a nation, we're ecstatic over it and to go through, but it's so small margins if you go on and not.
When you came on to do your preview of the game last week, you predicted, Jonas, exactly what was to come to pass. You said it would be a draw after extra time and it would go down to penalty kicks. Big picture, stylistically, did the game go how you imagined it would?
Not really. I thought US was better than I thought they were gonna be. They had much more control in their build-up, which didn't get Sweden to get any real counterattacks almost during the whole game, I think. And that led to US, basically restricted Sweden from creating any chances at all during 120 minutes, which is very rare when you see this Swedish team play. So, I think that part worked really well for the US team. And I remember we talked about before this game, and we said, like, okay, there is a couple of issues here that the US women have to solve. And we said that, okay, you can probably not solve every issue to the next game, but maybe you can solve 1 or 2 of them, and then you can build on to the next game. And I really think that they solved the build-up issue in this game here. I think the introduction of a double pivot, to have someone to play alongside Andy Sullivan, just made so much more control. And I have to say, Emily Sonnett, which I've seen was playing central defender in Sweden for Gothenburg many years ago, what a game she plays as a 6. What a game she plays. I think she is terrific in that game.
What a game. What a game. That was there wasn't a radical tactical overhaul. There was really one surprise selection, and Emily Sonnett, a remarkable human being. She's really a good vibes utility player. Most often, as you say, a defender stepping in. Jonas, this was her first ever appearance in the United States midfield, and she was magnificent alongside Andy Sullivan. She was like a hand grenade going off in there. What did you see?
Yeah, I saw that, but I also saw a player that was really clever in her positioning. So many times they open up these diagonal passes to the central defender, and all of a sudden now, for both Girma and Ertz, they did not only have the option to go to the fullback or to go long to the winger, but they could play these diagonal passes into the 6, and when the pass goes diagonal to the 6 can turn with the ball, face forward, and from there on, good play. But here I think that the good news stops for US, because I still think that led them, of course, to a little bit more. I still think that final third and getting that world-class attack in playing together, like I think they had 22 attempts, US. Maybe they had like 11 shots on target as well. But
Yes.
there is maybe only one or two chances that I would categorize as big chances, and not even that. And I think that is a problem. Sweden doesn't create anything either, but if US is gonna win a game like that, they need to create bigger chances. And I think that's the demand you can have on those players. And I think with the way they were progressing with the ball, that would definitely have been the next step.
So I want to talk about exactly that in a second, but I do want to sprinkle a little more good news before we plumb into the inky darkness of our exit. And you mentioned the two players I wanted to hit because you talked about how this Swedish team are fast, smart, physical, and they play for corners, which really blew my mind. You know, they wanted to set up their set piece advantage. They only won 3 corners all game, managed, as you say, just one shot on goal. So there was one more thing to highlight that did go right for the United States of this tournament, the centre-back partnership between Julia Ertz and Naomi Girma, who for me was the American player of the tournament, both immense. But Naomi Girma, what do you see when you see her play? Because I think she's phenomenal.
I know, but I can't tell you here on a podcast because I think I would ruin all the scouting secrets for Arsenal, I think. Yeah, I agree with you. I think she's astonishing, phenomenal. She's a world class talent. But the what I see with what's unique with her, I need to save if I come into a recruitment talk with her one day, so I can tell her that, so not some other manager can pick that up.
Jonas, no one's listened to this podcast. It's just you and me. I do get quite excited now that you're starting the Naomi Girma to Women's Super League rumours, which we'll just leave it as that. But you've highlighted the issue, which is really the greatest scar from this tournament. The United States, with all that firepower in that squad, unable to score a goal again in this game. Just 4 goals in 4 games. You talk about the lack of big chances, but why, Jonas? Why?
Yeah, because like you're saying, apart from the game against Vietnam, US, it was a constant theme during the rest of the World Cup of scoring goals. Defense was not a problem for US. I think it's a solid team that most of the time had a defensive record that should be good enough to winning football matches. I think that I listened to Tobin Heath, and Tobin is a very wise person that I learned a lot for when I had the privilege to coach her at Arsenal. And I know she said before the World Cup and said they're all world-class forwards that is selected, but their strengths maybe they like to set up situations that doesn't favor each other. So, for example, you have a 9 that would like crosses to come in, but then you have wide forwards that actually likes to cut inside and take shots, for example. And I think that's on a really basic level, I think that's where you need to start and say, like, football is very seldom to pick the best 11 individual players and put them on the pitch, but you have to pick the best team. And that is sometimes you have to make a decision as a manager where you will have fans and people like Rog, and they will be like, how can you leave this player out of the starting 11? She's so good, she has scored so many goals and made so many assists with her club team. And sometimes you just have to say, and she is a brilliant individual player, but she doesn't fit in as good as this player does here for the team. So I think that's one. 2, for that, I think it is still a quite young team. It's a lot of young players coming in, and to play a World Cup for USA, I don't think pressure becomes much heavier or bigger than that. And I think you shouldn't underestimate that occasion and coming into to play. And when there is not experienced players that scores the goals before, then of course there comes a lot of pressure onto these young players, and no doubt that they will grow a lot from this. I always think about that when I think about my own career, for example, or I look at else careers. It's like the moment you grow the most is when you get a challenge, is when you get a setback. And that's really what defines you. And I think that's what, for me, as an outsider looking into this US women's national team, I mean, they always thrived on challenges, sometimes in game and been able to come back, but no doubt that they will thrive off this challenge as well. And I think when the narrative is that the world counts them out, and start doubting them and so on, at least I hope for you guys that will ignite a fire that will take these young players on a really exciting journey and coming back.
Oh, God willing, God willing. But you talk about the number 9, Alex Morgan, leaving a World Cup with 0 goals. That sentence is honestly almost hard for me to fathom. She had 17 shots. By the way, it was also wild to see the legendary Arsenal striker Ian Wright tweet the following. He tweeted, "Managers put a lot of faith in Alex Morgan. Hopefully she delivers something and has the experience to come through at this stage of the game. She's fortunate to start every single game." Jonas, yeah, there was a fascinating piece in the English media today about the difference between actual performance and reputation. It's actually by Miguel Delaney of The Independent, who wrote about how the US had a unique challenge that international teams often don't have, fielding a handful of players who'd become icons and were almost undroppable. Did you get a sense of that looking at our squad?
When we discussed the squads at BBC before the tournament, I think there was one thing that really stuck out to me with the US squad, and it's the number of players that you would categorize in a peak age as a football player. And a peak age would be between 24 to 29 years old. That's a typical peak age for a footballer. And then you would come into a late peak maybe after that, and of course an early peak before that. But there was an absence of players on a peak age in the US women's national team, because the squad was either a late peak or it was very early peak, and the peak age was it's very few players. And I think that peak age is there for a reason, because it's sort of the combination between enough experience for your decision making and to handle big games and so on, but you still have a physique that can be quite optimal to playing football. So I think there is a good reason why you categorize it like that, and I think that's a problem. But I mean that's something really hard to change overnight, because that's obviously succession planning when you take a national team, and there has obviously been, what could you do different, because you've had a group of now older players that have been so good and been carrying the team so well and won everything there is to win. So when is the right time to drop these players and say, oh, we need to give someone younger the chance? But I think this is where you go and say, if you look as an association, I think this is where you need to see that the head coach always needs to win. Okay, so I don't think the head coach can be responsible for succession planning in an association like USA. It's like, it's about winning, but then you would need like a technical director that would look more long term and saying, okay, it's really important that we win this year, but what about next World Cup in 4 years' time? How do we make sure that we develop these players here? So I give an example, which is something that I'm just look from the outside, and there's probably a number of reasons for this. Is that when they have won, for example, and they and then they have gone on victory tours, for example, and it's been the same players that has been playing these games. And when I spoke to some of the players, I've been on the understanding that that's part of, or was part of, sort of the bonus agreement, that
Correct.
You won the World Cup, and then you could play the bonus or the victory games, and you get that as a part of your bonus. But then you have to see what a missed opportunity to play younger players in these games. I mean, you could play high pressure games, you could play half of the World Cup winning team, you could introduce younger talents, and you could really use that. But I think there has been a lot of those opportunities that unfortunately has gone missed, which has probably missed some players' development.
When you talk about peak 26 to 29, it's only Lindsay Horan, Rose Lavelle, Andy Sullivan first time, Alana Cook didn't take the field, Sonnett came in for that last game in terms of the outfield players in that range.
And you have to say, like, a Lindsay Horan is she's carrying a lot of the team. She is. You probably would need a much bigger core of players that had accumulated that experience.
And irrespective, second half, this Swedish team, your Swedish team, they were tiring, they were buckling, they were holding on. And we talked last time about how substitute averse the United States have been over the course of the group stage. And I have to ask you this again. In that second half, into extra time, leaving most of these starters out there, not trusting the bench. The United States' advantage in women's football has often been the depth of our bench. We have quantity as well as quality. And you talked about last time how the most important role of a coach is crunch time to tweak and adjust. Fingerspitzengefühl, excuse my German, fingertip feeling was the word that you taught us. What did you see down that stretch as the starters were left out there? Some of them shattered for the most part. Could you believe what you were watching?
I have a lot of respect for the decisions coaches make during the game, because it is much easier sometimes when you disconnect your emotions from the game. But I think it's so important to think about the concept, to say, I have a starting 11 and I have a finishing 11. And those things are always going to be constant in football, because you will need to do both. And a lot of time there is all focus on the starting 11, but actually the game looks much different when you start the game with both teams fresh. You usually have a lot of structure in the formations and so on. And what you could see, and when you read the game, was that the US came to more and more crossing situations. And if it's something that Alex Morgan is good at, it's crossing. So I was quite surprised when she got off there, because that's actually the kind of game that suits her really well. And to add on to that, then of course, when you see that you get that many opportunities for that, maybe then you want to introduce another midfielder that could be running inside, because a lot of times you say that you will have the usual suspects in the box. You will have your 9, you will have your 10, and you will have your opposite wide forward. So that's the 3 players, they're coming inside. But if you want 4 players inside, that is most of the time, that's your number 8. That's gonna invest and coming into that run. And there, I think, when you see that the game was tipping and US was taking over more and more of the game, there is the moment to go from saying having 2-6 in control and releasing one of them, getting up higher. And maybe at that time, Andy Sullivan and Emily Sonnett, neither one of them will commit these long runs inside. So if you have someone from the bench that could do that, that could maybe have been the winning push. But as I said, it's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, right?
It is easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, which is kind of what this podcast aims to be at its heart right now, Jonas. And we need to acknowledge, for Sweden, the goalkeeper, Zejcira Musovic, was having the game of her life. Second string goalkeeper at Chelsea. What did you see watching her? 11 saves, locked in like a Swedish Tim Howard.
Honestly, I was so happy for her, because I've known Zejcira since she was 16 years old. She was a young goalkeeper playing in Statena in Helsingborg, and we recruited her to Malmö, where I was the coach, and she came and she was the reserve goalkeepers, and she was reserve goalkeepers for so many years in Malmö. And the first goalkeeper left, and Zejcira was ready to play, and the club recruited in another first goalkeeper. And it happened again, and she kept on going. And then she eventually became the first team goalkeeper in Malmö. She broke into the Swedish national team, but same year, being number 2, being number 3 at times, had to wait a lot of camps to get that first cap. Then joining Chelsea, and first year didn't play much, but has played more and more. I think her development has been amazing. And when you see her playing a game like that in the World Cup, and you when you've seen the grind that comes to that moment. But remember, Sachira now, she's peak age, but she has worked so many years to come to that point. So I was just very happy for her, to be honest. When I know how much work she has done for it, and I really, yeah.
All number 2 goalkeepers listening, may you all grind on and have a moment, an nth of that great. But to penalties, and we talked about how there's a whole body of academic research on the penalty shootout. Geir Jordet, professor at the Norwegian School of Sports Scientists, Google him. It's amazing what he has understood about how human beings perform in the crucible of the utmost pressure, the penalty shootout with the world watching. And Jonas, this was a crazy penalty shootout. The good penalties were very, very good, and the bad penalties were truly bloody awful. First, the United States bringing on 2 penalty takers, Christy Mewis and the veteran Kelly O'Hara, with seconds left in the game. I think neither had a single kick of the ball before they had to walk to the penalty spot. Do you agree with that philosophy?
Depending on how good the players are to take a penalty, of course. I think that's the important thing. I mean, you have American football for you guys. There you bring in the kicker to do a field goal, and maybe he hasn't kicked the ball for the whole game, and then you're coming in and everyone's trusting him to set up the game. So I think it's like, I don't see a problem with it. Of course, you can do a lot of preparation off the pitch before you step on the pitch. Yeah, and I mean also with warming up and so on, and you have more time when you're off the pitch to study. They could, for example, have gone through statistics on the Swedish goalkeeper and say that she's most likely to not save when you hit the ball there, and maybe they would have matched that and say, we have 2 penalty takers here on the bench, that their preferred side is really her weak side, for example. I don't know, but it could be all those kind of thinking behind it. So I don't have a problem with that per se. It's the same when you bring in a goalkeeper. I remember in the Men's World Cup when Louis van Gaal put in the big goalkeeper there for Netherlands. And
Krul.
Yeah, Krul, and they won. He didn't look too happy, the goalkeeper that came off at that moment. That wasn't what it was planned. It's probably a different dynamic because it's not such a pleasant feeling to take a penalty as a player. As a goalkeeper, you more have everything to win, kind of.
Yeah, God, I love that though. Send in the field goal unit. But for the United States, for 3 shooters to miss the goal frame entirely, and 2 of the most experienced veterans on the squad to be amongst them. Megan Rapino, I think, had converted 21 of 22 penalties before this one for the United States. Can you explain, from what you understand mentally, how that happens?
I think it's a really high-pressured moment. And I think, and it's so interesting, when I was studying sports psychology, and Gary Jordet, and this is many years before he was famous, so he was there to do a lecture on it, because he worked for some Norwegian university, and I was at the University of Lund, and we were sitting there in the basement, and he came and they shared his studies. But I remember him saying then that, and this was on the men's game, but he said, a player on a penalty shootout was more likely to win after he had won the Ballon d'Or than he was before. And you be like, that doesn't make sense initially for it. Because you think, like, why would that be? Obviously, you've been awarded the Ballon d'Or because you're a great football player. But it's some part of that pressure playing in, and sort of the expectation that people have on you. So a lot of time on the high pressured moments, you don't want to have necessarily your most awarded player onto that. And which is the most pressured penalty kick? It's the number 4. The 4th penalty kick is the most pressured. penalty kick. And if I'm not wrong, I think that's the one that Megan Rapino takes. And she just joins this long list, not so much in the women's game before, but in the men's game that you could go and follow with Ballon d'Or winners that has missed penalties in really important penalty shootouts.
Yeah, I mean, Gears Your Day, whose name I am butchering, and you said it so beautifully. He also wrote that players who have a massive transfer attached to their name also have a higher propensity to miss in the crucible of pressure.
It's the same mechanism of that. You have this external thing that adds on to sort of the pressure on performance and delivery.
And in that regard, Sophia Smith, just 22 years of age, who had been the commercial face of the team, if you were her manager, she had a chance to win the game for her team. She had the ball. She ended up Harry Kaning it over the bar. She is so bloody young. She will rise and ride again. What would your message be to the truly incredible Sophia if you were a manager post-game? What would you say?
Never doubt to take a penalty again. It's part of it, but you never know which penalty you're gonna score or which one you're gonna miss. But you're gonna be sure that if you never take a penalty, you're never gonna be there for the team when it needs you. And then everyone will have their own journey. You will have players that will be scoring all their penalties in their early years, and then maybe like a player like Rapino that misses her last penalty, her last kick in the national team. Or you have someone like Sophia Smith that misses here now, but if she takes this the right way, it's gonna be for the better. You have a player like we saw in England's men's, for example, Bukayo Saka, who missed the shootout, and I mean he's taking so good penalties now and after that, and I think it's about the courage to do not avoid it, confront it, go there again, challenge yourself. Like I said, that most growth will come through setbacks. So I think it's that support. And I mean, if you're talking about building a culture, I think that's the foundation of your culture. Everyone can be really good persons when you win. Players can be that, coaches can be that as well. But it's what happens when we don't win, when we get setbacks, where we fundamentally want to see one thing in a team, and that is, do people have my back? Because I believe that's one of the biggest fears we have as human beings when we are in groups, is to see like, if I fail, am I still going to be accepted? Am I still going to be trusted? Are people going to pick me up when I fall? And that's a really good moment to try and live that culture. And if you do that, then that could be the spark to something bigger.
God, Jonas, football as in life, the greatest fear is the fear of being alone, the way you frame it. And in that vein, the final Swedish penalty, the United States eliminated by a millimetre, an agony. But was it really a millimetre that we lost by? When you look at the whole campaign, big picture, 1 win against Vietnam, then 3 draws, that penalty shootout, exit. Miguel Delaney wrote in that piece I mentioned in The Independent, he said, a fundamental truth remains that this United States team would likely have gone much further, probably won it again under a better coach. Was this a case of a talented squad being made less than the sum of the parts? How do you handicap it? How much of it was coaching? How much of it was talent in terms of this early exit?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing in football is to explain something from the results and then deduct everything back from there on. And that's the narrative. And I have to say I hate that because it's I don't like that. Because you have to see it from different things. Like I pointed out things where I think like from a stylistical point of view, where I think like, okay, here I think the US team could do better or different, but it's just my opinion. But when I see it objectively, US has in all of the 4 games that they've been playing in the World Cup created more and better chances than their opponents. That's a fact. In all the 4 games. The problem has been that the scoreline has not reflected that. They play a round of 16, and you have to remember, Sweden is ranked number 3 in the world, and US is ranked number 1. When we just see at the chances that they create during 120 minutes, there is no doubt about that most of the time when you play that game, US will win. But they didn't this time, and now everyone then after tried to find explanation to do it. And they're like, oh, surely something be wrong for it. But US doesn't have a guarantee to find things in the last minute. I remember when Abby Wambach's goal against Brazil, for example, which is an astonishing goal. But it's also coming from, what is it left to play? A minute?
Yeah.
Something like that. And of course, those things can't happen all the time. They become a part of the narrative. Once they happen, people take them for granted and be like, of course, this always happens to us. But it doesn't. So I think they've been quite hard done by that. With a combination of a succession planning that has not really been there, where they missed a lot of players in the peak age. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I'm not that overly critical when I see it from the side.
It's very validating. We are in this moment of generational shift, and you do look at these young players. Sophia Smith, 22, Trinity Rodman, 21, Naomi Girma, 23, Emily Fox, 25, Alyssa Thompson, just 18.
Yeah, but this is what I mean. It's like some people, they go like, oh, US goes out in the round of 16, they're over, and then you look like, yeah, but the individual talents in this team is wanted by all clubs around the world. They're in their early 20s or not even in their 20s. Of course it's not over. Of course they have a really, really good base of talents to build on here. There's no doubt about it.
I love that, and it's validating. But I let me ask it this way. The 2024 Summer Olympics will be upon us before we know it. I feel like I'm speaking to you as if you're a doctor, Jonas, who's about to make a prognosis. So as you're saying it, are we just caught in a moment, the United States, of generational change, of injuries, an off cycle? Or is there something more profound that you've seen, since, witnessed, which is about a failure in youth development, a fundamental systemic challenge of how the quality of the players on the ball, their decision making, that we must face up to as a nation?
I think it's different styles, of course, in how you play football. And I actually spent a year in the US coaching. This is many years ago in New York, for a company called MLS Camps. So we just did like what you say, like consultancy with grassroots clubs around there. And I thought when I was over there at that time, I thought youth soccer in America had so many good things with it, and you could see that participation levels were really huge for it. And I mean, this is 20 years ago now, so I thought that US soccer would have come even further back then when I saw how large the participation levels was at that point. Why isn't it there? I don't know. It's of course it's a really big competition about a lot of sports in US, which is great for you guys to be able to see a lot for entertainment, but it's also a lot of competition among the top athletes or the top talents. Remember, in most countries, all the top talent athletes, they go on and play football, or what you call soccer. But you don't have that by nature. There is more likelihood that they sometimes will pick another sport instead of soccer. So that's one thing. Then I think it's about finding a vision in how you play, because I think there's been a lot of talk about winning, and we win, but that's not that interesting if you're not really sure on how you're gonna win and what is gonna be our USP in this. Like, what are we gonna build on? What is gonna be our strength? What do our players know? What do they want? What motivates them? What is our culture in how we want to play the game? And I think that is so important to do. And a lot of time, I think those things are missing. But that's not only in USA. That is common around the world. But some associations or nations have been really good at that. And I really think that that is the next step. And it's a great opportunity for the US women to use this moment here as a restart.
I love that. In fact, every team I support, Jonas, I realise has no vision about how they want to win. But if that is the takeaway you're framing, I think that is genuinely incredibly empowering for the United States. We will win again, but we need to decide how, what the style is, what motivates our players. Deep, profound questions. I need to quickly say, or else it will make me look incredibly small, which I am. Congratulations, Jonas. Sweden now move on to face those poet warriors, Japan, who for me have played.
I'm worried about that.
Yeah, the most sophisticated, and I like this, Jonas, the vulnerable Jonas, the most sophisticated and devastating football in the tournament. Under Fatoshi Ikeda, I mean, they can smother opponents with their front five. They can also cede possession, score ruthlessly, clinically on the counter. I don't know if you've seen a vulnerability that you've spied, but there's real reason to worry there, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. It could be, of course, a little bit of weakness in the aerial play and with the set pieces, which Sweden are strong in. But Japan is a great example of. I mean, that was a national team that really captured most of our hearts when they were winning the World Cup and
2011.
yeah, and they were successful a couple of years after that. But then they dropped in levels. They also had to go through a succession planning for it. And this is the new generation of Japanese players coming on here now. And people were not really talking about them before this tournament. People said this is the most open World Cup to date. And me, among others, were speaking about 6-7 nations that we thought could win it. I did not mention Japan. It's a big mistake. Because now here, when I see that, they are one of the favorites to go to the final. I think they have been absolutely amazing in the way they play. And they found so many different ways to find ways to win matches because they're not only good at playing their short passing game, they're really compact and aggressive pressing as a unit, and their counterattacks from there on, it's like lightning. I think they have been really enjoyable to see, and I definitely have no assurances whatsoever that Sweden will go through there. So that's going to be nerve-wracking.
The physical collective power and height of Sweden against the technically exquisite Japan. Tell us, what do you expect to see? How will this game end?
When you have seen Japan play, they've been very much in a mid-block. They want to get these counterattacks happening, and I think this is. We had an English coach in Swedish football who said something that stuck with me. He said, "Don't play how you dream, play how you can." And I think this is what it's going to be for Sweden as well. Because their own self-picture will at times be, oh, we can play through this Japanese team, we can play short passes, we can build. And I think they're going to lose the ball in midfield and Japan is going to counterattack them. But if they play to their physicality, if they play a little bit more in behind to start with against Japan, especially when they invite them in the mid-block, because it is one of the downsides to a mid-block is that you will still be quite exposed for a long ball in behind, while the player that passes the ball can be quite close to that. So that increases precision, of course. Then I think Japan can get problems with that. That will mean that Japan will need to go a little bit higher up. They will lose their compactness. That should enable Sweden to play more because now you have more time and space to play through. But I think that start of the game is really important for Sweden, and I think that comes down to being humble enough to know what is our strength in this game, because this Japan team, they're so good. And I mean, we saw against Spain and Spain, who are so good at passing the ball, they were profiting on any mistake that they made here. I think that's warnings enough.
Don't play how you dream, play how you can. If I were to get a tattoo, that would be a serious contender. We've got to finish by talking about Australia. Incredible scenes today, on into the quarters after downing Denmark. The hosts look like a team feeding off the energy of the crowd, and now they've got their best player back, Sam Kerr, coming on, calf injury be damned, for the last 10 minutes. Jonas, how different are Australia with and without Sam Kerr? I'm asking a man who prob has Sam Kerr nightmares on occasions in his sleep life for reals. What does she bring? How do you stop it?
Yeah, she brings a lot of quality. And yeah, sometimes I tell her after the games when we play against Chelsea, I feel like I'm really tired of you. Stop doing things like that. Yes. Yeah.
What does she say?
She just smiles, which is also annoying, right? But I mean, she combines a lot of different things, of course. But I mean, she's really, really good running in behind. I think she has excellent timing doing that. Her finishing ability, her composure when she finishes is top. And I think that's something that I really missed actually in this World Cup so far. It's composed finishes. I think when I saw Aitana Bonmati against Switzerland, her two finishes, I was like, yes, that's what you need when you finish, that composure. But there's been a lot of stressed and rushed actions in finishing moments. And that composure, Sam Kerr definitely has that.
God.
And she has such good aerial control. She hangs in the air. She's really good coming at the back post, scoring headers. So that versatility is good. Now what you need is, of course, it's a 10 that can play in front of her. And I think that's actually what Australia has found really well here in this World Cup, because in the absence of Sam Kerr, a young player like Mary Fowler has played more and more and probably played more minutes than she would have without.
Yeah.
And I think she works great as a 10 and be able to play in behind a player like Sam Kerr, and then you will have Caitlin Ford and Hayley Raso on the sides, and all of a sudden you have a world-class attack. With Steph Catley coming on as a left fullback there. And Australia joins the gang where Japan, maybe it's a little bit injustice to take them there with saying like they're definitely teams that are strongest on the counter-attacks. And when they don't have the ball, you always have the fear to lose the ball to them because they will counter-attack. I think their problem has been Australia is when they need to create things themselves. But going into this knockout rounds now, quarterfinals and onwards, they don't need to create things themselves. Probably, I think they can be a really strong counter-attacking team, and they were one of the 6-7 teams I thought about before that actually can go all the way. I have a lot of respect for their coach Tony Gustafsson. I think he's done a lot of good things in his coaching career, and I know he's really thorough in the way he prepares the team. So they have a plan for everything.
He's got a black belt in video analysis, that man. But Sam Kerr, the way you describe it, she's one of the few players who is don't play how you can, play how you dream, and she executes on that in every regard. And this World Cup is better for having her on the field in it. Last question for you, Jonas. The crowd at that Australia-Denmark game, 75,784. Let me say that again. 75,784. Just delirious scenes. And the Women's World Cup total attendance record has already been exceeded. We're only in the last 16. And you're someone that's dedicated their whole life to women's football, to the growth of the game. What emotions are you experiencing watching this delirious festival, this spectacle? And also, when you project that forward, what are you feeling?
I feel that there is a massive momentum in women's football, and we can see this growth. It's season by season, and it is quite amazing to be a part of, and to see these players being able to both to develop but also to live in an area where development is so fast. It's very exciting. And I think if you would say that women's football would be a stock, that would be my number one pick to buy. Because it's the momentum it has and the growth it's not done. It's gonna continue to grow, and it's like a snowball effect. Once it gets moving, it's just gonna get more and more volume, and this is where it is at the moment. But no doubt that this has been a huge success, and the future, it's going to be so exciting. Where it takes off.
God willing, Jonas, listening to you, you make women's football seem like Bitcoin, but for real. We are all in, Jonas. Got to say, one of the joys of my World Cup, meeting and talking and learning from you. We wish you and your Sweden lycka till.
Tack så mycket.
Courage, mot. Listen to the full version of this podcast and all our podcasts wherever you get your pods. But first, subscribe here for more Men in Blazers videos. And courage.